We're going to talk about what to do when you need to advocate for your highly sensitive child in public. So what brought me to this topic was actually a parent in our group. So we have a Facebook group with the same name of the podcast, Parent Your Highly Sensitive Child Like a Ninja. And a parent submitted a question and I wanted to do an episode on it. So because we got about 45 people just chatting in that message, and I really want to make sure that we're taking control of what we can control as parents of highly sensitive kids, and then also paying attention to the societal influences that our kids are going to have over the years and what skills they need to learn. Now, let's make sure that we're putting this in context, right? So for those of you watching, you're likely parenting your sensitive child and keeping meltdowns at bay, or trying to, right? Most parents who get stuck in the meltdown cycle, their kids are hitting, kicking, yelling, screaming, they're throwing things, running away, can really get tripped up with finding ways to stop the meltdowns without having to walk on eggshells, without having to yell or threaten or use timeouts or any other traditional parenting, because gentle parenting seems to be insufficient for sensitive kids. They need much more structure, they need more clear approach. And as you're taking on this hard task of raising a sensitive kid and teaching them resiliency, it can be very difficult, right? If you don't have a clear path forward to figure out what skills your child needs to learn in order to demonstrate effective behavior in social environments, as well as how to understand whether or not your child's behavior is appropriate or not. And people are going to say things, right? Whether that be a cashier at a store, like in this example, which we'll get to soon, or coaches, teachers, pediatricians, if your child is struggling to manage their big emotions and it gets to be too much. It can be really difficult for you as a parent to know how much do you really say and what you need to cover. So I want to make sure that we're covering the same thing. Obviously, if your child is struggling with those daily meltdowns, we help parents of highly sensitive kids eliminate daily meltdowns, shutdowns, refusals. If this is happening regularly for your child, it's not developmentally appropriate. You're in the right place. It's not your fault that you're stuck. And it's also true that there is a way out. This does not have to be your reality, okay? So when you're dealing with this challenge, I know that you might be feeling a lot of self-doubt. You might be wondering whether or not it's even worth having a conversation with a stranger if they're commenting on your child's behavior. And I want to unpack this experience and this example today because there were a fair amount of parents who commented in our Facebook group that shared some responses that I would give a thumbs up to, and then other parents responded in ways that indicated that these parents were struggling to really figure out what would be appropriate in that dynamic. There's a difference between having an urge or an impulse in public to defend your child and to actually advocate for them. So I want to make sure that we're unpacking that because there's obviously, for all of us, we want our children to feel loved and cared for and understood, and we want also to be able to help our children pass on their own needs to us so that we can help them understand what they're really communicating, and then also get their needs met as their parents. And also, it's our job as parents to teach our kids how to manage their emotions safely and effectively. And so if other people are commenting in society about these behaviors that your child is displaying in the community, it can feel embarrassing. You could feel a lot of pressure trying to deal with this. And it could be that you feel like the person who's commenting is out of line. It's not their place, which if your emotional triggers are not managed effectively, you can feel defensive. You get aggressive, frustrated, overwhelmed in this situation. I'm not saying physically aggressive. I just mean verbally aggressive in your tone and the accusations that you're making. And so I want to talk about this because there's a lot going on in today's society, and what people think that they can, or how people think they can and should interact with each other in terms of correcting inappropriate behavior. And as a parent of a sensitive kid, your kid is going to experience this throughout their life. And it's up to you to model effective communication rather than just either ignore it or avoid it or be reactive to it. So I want to talk about this. Okay, so I'm obviously going to keep this post anonymous. Just focus on the concern here, and I'm going to summarize because the post is long. Okay, so parent responds, says that she identifies more as a shy person herself, and then has a highly sensitive 3-year-old, and the 3-year-old was running off, was getting upset, having to ride into the cart, and then probably some sort of store like Target or Walmart where they're giving away stickers at the end of the line, and the cashier had said, "You need to stop your whining. I don't give stickers to kids that whine." Right, and the mom had reported that the cashier had a very stern and angry voice, and mom was taken aback, and so glared at the cashier, told her son it's okay, and then let's go. Right. So this mom reports that she was very angry and she was upset. Now, I totally get it as a parent. It can feel very frustrating when someone else is trying to parent your child. You can also feel surprised or startled that someone is commenting on your child's behavior. And as a parent, it is important to untangle your child's behavior from your identity as a mom or as a dad, right? And this is something that needs to be worked on in your own mindset and your own psychology, because as many of us were raised, our behavior was viewed by our parents growing up in the old school parenting as a reflection of our parents' well-being, if you will, right? You're making mommy upset, for example. Why are you upset? You're making me upset, right? There's an enablement and a codependency there that is typical in guilt-tripping sort of parenting conversations. So if this is how you were raised, or one of the ways that your parents used to address or manipulate your behavior to see what they wanted to see in terms of your behavior, then this can feel really frustrating when you're trying to help your child, even as young as 3, follow through on expectations and have somebody else comment on their behavior, because there can be a trigger there, right? So that's one thing. We can identify where mama was feeling angry, frustrated, overwhelmed, and then also very defensive, right? Because when, one of the things that we teach our clients is to be detached from other people's opinions of their children. Now, it's a lot easier to do that if you're confident in the way that you're raising your kid, right? So where I would advise this mom to focus first is in clearly understanding the limits that she's setting for her kid, and then also educating herself on the developmentally appropriate behavior for a 3-year-old. It's of course developmentally appropriate behavior for a 3-year-old to be sad that something is not going the way that they want them to, and then to whine. Now, where we get stuck is if that frequency, intensity, and duration is above and beyond the peer normalcy, right? So what do I mean by that? Every day, all day long, just feels like you can never catch a break. You're walking on eggshells, feels like Chinese water torture to be around your kid because they never actually hit emotional baseline, right? This is a challenge. Now, when I say that, I want to talk about you relating to your child. I'm not talking about your kid putting on a beautiful performance in front of other people and you using that same timeline data to then say, well, most of the day they're fine for other people, perfect angel, and it's just with me. So let's pay attention to that entire day as high quality relationships, and then say, well, since I only spend about 30% of the time with my kid outside of work and school hours, then that means that 70% of the time they're fine, and it's then they're just kind of fried, right? So we got to give them some grace. I really want to pay attention to this, because when your child is around you, they are meant to feel the most calm, connected, and safest. If your child is emotionally expressive at high levels, for the vast majority of the time when they're with you, that doesn't mean that they're safe. It means that they are with their person who is designed to keep them safe. But if they are behaving in unsafe ways and sad and irritable and annoyed or even destructive ways, then that is not a signifier that they are safe with you. Psychologically, they are not feeling safe in their emotions. That's a big myth. I'm going to spend some time busting that another time. You can definitely go to our training where I break this down. And we have that accessible and link in our bio, wherever you're watching this, or listening to this show. But one thing that is so important for us to pay attention to in a situation like this is, I'm absolutely not saying that this mom doesn't have a connected relationship with her child, or that the child is developmentally inappropriate in the behavior. I didn't say that. What you need to notice is if your child cries in a cart and they're around age 3 or 4, because they want to be walking and yet they couldn't, there was a natural consequence. They were running around the store. It was time to put them in the cart. Then you might say, okay, this is totally normal behavior. Now, if your kid is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, no, not developmentally appropriate. Okay. So it is important for us to be paying attention to age as well as emotional age, whether or not your child is meeting those milestones on time. And then also frequency, right? Because if this parent was telling me the child was struggling all day, same thing struggling in the cart, same thing struggling once they got home, same thing struggling once they got home, and went to bed all day long, even for a 3-year-old, not developmentally appropriate. Okay, so I want to make sure that we're looking at this one narrow tunnel vision event, and I'm not extrapolating from that, and you aren't either. Right? So as an expert, it's my job to look at the whole picture and really to give you an answer in this situation dependent on the bigger context. Even if you want an answer that, this behavior is normal or not normal. It's not that simple, right? So I want to make sure that we're clear on that. Now, obviously, in this instance, if this was going on and the kiddo was just struggling because the child is 3, we would say the kid's being a 3-year-old, and then we would say that the cashier was inappropriate, for sure, 100%. The cashier should not, for any customer in the store, use a scowl to indicate communication, nor an angry tone to indicate communication, whether that person is 96, 3, 39, 15, it's not high quality customer service. Now, can people be human? Absolutely. Can we show grace to this person? Absolutely, right? Now, it sounds as if this person was withholding an item that they give to every customer, right? And so this is where the situation gets tricky, because we had parents in the comments of this post get very offended by this situation, and I want to pay attention to that, right? Because where your personal sense of justice stops and then you move into righteous offense, it indicates to me whether or not you're going to be able to manage your emotions around your children, right? Wherever you are, there you go. So if a story about someone who engaged in an injustice gets you that fired up, then that's a clear indicator that there's some room for growth for you, right? And that's an invitation that you have as a parent, because it's likely you feel easily offended by your kids as well, and that this plays into your management with your child, whether that be around your kids or with your kids directly. It could be with your spouse who's not parenting in the way that you want. Could be in public with other people who are interacting with your kids. You have the urge or the impulse to keep your kid close to home. So there's all kinds of ways for this to play out, and it is important to pay attention to your emotional triggers and whether or not you are actually developmentally appropriately as an adult demonstrating safe communication. So There's an important piece here where there was one parent who mentioned that I prefer to respond to my child in front of the adult and say, and she gives the example, everyone gets grouchy sometimes, or it's really hard to run errands when you're tired. So I want to pay attention to those two sentences and let's unpack it, okay? The first one is everyone gets grouchy sometimes. Now, if this mom was saying that to her kid, then we have one layer of validation happening where she's saying what you're doing is common for a lot of people. All right. That is validation. It's not as direct as the validation that we teach our clients, but it can communicate to the child that their behavior is normal. For a 3-year-old, though, it's pretty tough for a 3-year-old to pick up on the fact that everyone else gets grouchy sometimes. It's actually not developmentally appropriate for a 3-year-old to receive that type of validation because the 3-year-old doesn't care. A 3-year-old's a honey badger in the vast majority of their life. They're egocentric. They pay attention to themselves. So using validation around how other people would feel the same way is actually an ineffective way to validate. So this is why it's so important to really have professional support if your kid's having daily meltdowns or freaking out or imploding on a daily basis, because for you as a parent, especially if this behavior is going on beyond age 4, it's overwhelming, but you're also missing a fair amount in the details. The devil's in the details when we're talking about breaking out of patterns. Because yes, that's a validation statement, but it's not validating to a 3-year-old. Okay, so that's one thing that I want to pay attention to. Okay, the next thing is this mama shared, it's really hard to run errands when you're tired. Right? So again, we're talking about the concept of what the adult is experiencing. The adult is experiencing the fact that errands need to be run, and then also that there's exhaustion involved. The 3-year-old is not present to the fact that they're tired. So it's not honed in enough in terms of an understanding of what needs to be handled. And so what I want to do is really focus on the fact that with validation with young kids, often we tell our clients that simple is better, and really paying attention to the child's experience rather than the parent's global assessment of what's happening. So the parent's global assessment of what's happening is, we are running errands, you are tired, this feels hard. And the 3-year-old is like, I just want to run around. That's what I want to be doing right now. I don't even know what errands are, right? And I'm kind of kidding, because the 3-year-old could probably tell you what the word errand means or understands it a little bit, but the concept of the action that we're here at a store to gather things and we're not here to run around and play, that part is over the 3-year-old's head, all right? So I wanted to highlight this. And then I think the other piece that I wanted to talk about here as I'm scrolling through these comments is around the direct communication to the other person, the cashier, right? And so a fair amount of people were communicating to saying that they would have communicated to the cashier by going to speak to the manager. And this is a thing that I'm just going to go on a short rant with you about, because it's totally a soapbox of mine. Direct feedback to someone is not scary when you deliver it in a non-scary way. So where I find that and I hate this term because I have a friend named Karen, but our society has gotten too passive aggressive, quite frankly. We have gotten so passive aggressive that we are much more likely to not give direct feedback to someone and give safe emotional candor and communication. We'd rather go over their head to tattle on them. And yet we tell our kids that tattling's not okay. Right? Or we try to teach our kids that they can advocate for their own needs. So I really want to be paying attention to our desire is to not have the direct conversation with this person. Maybe because you don't think that the person's going to take the feedback, but partly also, I'm just going to speculate. Correct me if I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments. Feel free to tell me that if you're the one that put this comment in, tell me if I'm completely off base. I'm happy to be corrected here. But I want to invite you to notice, is a little bit of you trying to avoid conflict in order to feel like you did something and said something to protect your ego? Or are you trying to actually affect real change? Because going to speak to someone who doesn't have a firsthand knowledge in that puts the cashier in a position where they can't be receptive to that feedback very well. Now, is it your job to manage the cashier? No, it is the manager's job to manage the cashier. In a situation like this, I would venture to guess that some feedback directly to the cashier could make an impact, right? Now I'm going to share with you an example of this. Now, some of you know my story. I was not very effective at managing my emotions back in the day in grad school, and I worked in the restaurant business from age 12 through 24-ish or something like that, okay? So in grad school, I was a waitress, downtown Georgetown, DC, busy restaurant. I was fried, I was tired, I was ready for my shift to be over probably. I don't remember the circumstances of why I was stressed. All I remember was that I was in the weeds, I was stuck, and I was kind of dry, like short with a couple that I was serving. Hi, how can I help you? What do you need? What would you like? Right? Like just not very jovial, but also not offensive. Right? I wasn't a jerk because, I've been doing this for such a long time that I wasn't gonna present poorly to my customer. I might have kvetched. Like I said, I didn't have a great job managing my emotion, but definitely could have kvetched in the kitchen about said customer. But this customer wasn't, I don't recall the customer was a pain in the neck, okay? So normal, I was just in a mood. I was just having a day or a moment, right? And so, I wasn't very friendly, if you will. So in this situation, again, it's super busy at the restaurant. This plays into the context. The gentleman pulled me aside, right? So this is a gentleman, and he was with his date. I don't know if they were together or whatever, but he was with his partner there, and they were out to dinner. And he pulled me aside, and he was still sitting at the high top table here. So booster seat kind of thing. What's the word? Counter stool. Okay. So he's at a counter stool, high top table, pulls me aside so he could stay seated. And he kind of, because it was loud, he had to sort of whisper in my ear. He wasn't whispering, but he had to speak into my ear for me to hear in the, the acoustics in a restaurant like that. They're not that great. Right. And what I remember was that in that dynamic, he actually threatened me. Now, he didn't threaten me in a way where it was physically aggressive, but his tone and his conversation was that he was upset with the way that I was delivering his my communication. However, he tried to use force to get me to comply. And so he said, this is over a decade ago, so I don't remember exactly what he said, but I do remember how he made me feel. And so in that moment, he basically indicated that if I didn't shape up, I wouldn't be getting a tip. So, bit misogynistic, and also true that my attitude wasn't the best. And I think, quite frankly, he commented and used the word attitude, right? So very traditionally focused for that communication. And that's not the way I'm saying we should communicate to said cashier at the store, right? Hey, lady, you need to watch how you talk to a 3-year-old, right? I'm not saying we should say that. That's impulsive. It's not effective. It's not communicative in a calm manner. However, going over her head and completely skirting over the conversation, also not appropriate. We're adults here. It's our job to model to our kids that we can say something to them. And so when we coach our clients who have this inhibition response because of maybe how they were parented, or just because their own skills of confidence need to be shifted, this is important, guys. This is where our kids need to learn from us, right? So we don't leave any stone unturned when we work with our clients. We don't say, oh, yeah, you probably should have kept your mouth shut. No, in a situation like this, I actually wouldn't support that. I would say, here's how you can do it, because I know you beat yourself up for not saying anything, and that sucked, right? Like, obviously this mom is asking for help. How do I say something next? The question isn't just, what do I say next? The question is, how do I want to feel when I'm actually saying, that wasn't appropriate? I don't appreciate the way you spoke to my son. Next time, if you're concerned with a child who's crying, you should speak directly to the parent about whether or not the parent wants them to have the sticker. And leave it at that, right? And I just came up with that off the cuff. I didn't prepare this for you. But what I want to acknowledge is an adult to another adult saying your behavior is inappropriate, and here's what you can do next time when this problem happens again. That's a leadership skill. Sensitive kids are born natural leaders. The problem is if they're not managing their big emotions, their leadership comes out in, quote, bossiness, perfectionism, rude, judgmental behavior, right? Like my way or the highway, or they shut down because they see what they want to have happen. They don't know how to communicate that in a safe way, so they just don't say anything at all. But because sensitive kids can notice the big picture and the small picture at the same time, it's our job as parents of sensitive kids to raise our kids in a way where they're communicating what they see, because they're very, very good at it. They're very, very good at it. And so I want us to pay attention to this because this is so crucial for us. We can't raise our children beyond a skill set that we don't have ourselves. I'm making sure my double negatives here are thorough here, right? If you're not using a skill regularly, or if you don't feel confident with that skill, you can't teach it to your kid, because your child is going to not see what you're coaching them to do in reality. They need to see that from you regularly. We can't leave our kids on an island and say, yeah, you go have that conversation. And when they're 7 and they're coming to you and say, Mommy, she just spoke to me in a mean tone. Okay, why don't you go ahead and tell her you didn't like that? And then the child for the last 5 years has had zero recall of you advocating in a situation like that. They're highly unlikely that they're going to actually speak up for themselves. And so when we focus on the fact that highly sensitive kids without emotion management skills grow up to be people-pleasing, perfectionistic workaholics at best, or they swing to the deep end of that side of the pendulum where they're engaging in risky, life-threatening behaviors at worst, or aggressive behaviors at worst, then what is important to understand is that this is the narrow column your kid is developing in if you're not teaching your child to manage their big emotions and communicate their needs effectively. So where do we lie in this situation? I just gave you an example, right? We've got a couple of other parents who shared with this. I'm sorry my son's having a bad day. Sorry for his attitude today. In that situation, we're not going to apologize for a 3-year-old. I would not advise my clients to do that. I don't do that for me. If my 3-year-old screamed in her ear and it was pierced, then sure, I would say, oh, I'm so sorry, he's having a hard time. But if the child is sad in a public setting, I am not going to apologize for that behavior, because children will be children and children are learning. And so it's not our job to teach our kids to put up and shut up. And so I want to make sure that we're really clear when we're advocating for our kids, we're not apologizing for their behavior. We can acknowledge that their behavior impacts others, and we're not the one behaving in this way. So when we use words like we are having a hard day, or I'm so sorry he's having a hard day, if your child didn't do something directly to another person, I would not advise apologizing for that, because it actually keeps society's view going that it's children's jobs to make adults happy, and that is just simply ineffective. Let's see. Now, this parent goes on to say that sensitive children need to learn to be sensitive to others. This is a 3-year-old we're talking about, so it's actually very inappropriate to ask a 3-year-old to not be sad in public. Now, if we were talking about a 9-year-old who is screaming in public, that's not developmentally appropriate, unless that 9-year-old was screaming for and just witnessed a severe trauma, right? So or had a serious loss or a loss at all in their life, then we would give them grace that day. But if the child is screaming in public on a daily basis and is 9, has been doing this since 3, then the child has a lot of skill gaps to build, right? So I want to make sure that we're not making 3-year-olds be 8-year-olds, be 9-year-olds, be 11-year-olds. That's not appropriate. It's a huge leap to ask of young children. So that is really important. I wanted to make sure that we were covering this. And then another parent said, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. It looks like the cashier is having an even rougher time right now than you. This is where we're getting to the point where we're explaining the situation to the child in front of the other person, and the other person is either expected to hear or not hear. And this is where I draw the line on passive aggressive behavior, because as an adult, it's our job to explain how other adults are behaving, and I prefer to do that one-on-one with my kid without other listening ears, because then the child feels fully comfortable to ask, but why did they do that, mommy? And in that dynamic, I don't have to create conjecture or make assumptions that aren't helpful for my kid to learn. I can make conjecture or make assumptions with my child in the privacy of that conversation, but I would table that half of the conversation for later. Now, another parent said, let's work on your customer service tone and choice of words, please. It's easy to get upset. And she was saying to the other, I think she was saying to the other parent that it's easy to get upset. And she was actually a former manager. Exactly. Like I totally, you guys heard my story earlier in terms of the restaurant business. I totally get having a day where you're just not on your game and you just wish you weren't there, right? She was also saying that cashier might be feeling like she's doing this mom a favor by trying to kind of scare the kid into compliance. And so the dynamic is really important to understand. This is where we get to rise above the natural tendency for us is to demonstrate emotionally immature behavior, like passive aggressive behavior or going over somebody's head. Now, if the cashier had made a threat, like, you're such a naughty boy, you shouldn't do any of that, what's wrong with you? Then I would go to the management. But the cashier said, you don't get a sticker. And in that situation, I would say, I'm going to ask for a sticker. I'll be asking someone else for one. I'll be handling my child's behavior. Thank you. And in that situation, I'm not course correcting the cashier. I might not think that the cashier has the capacity to learn from me, might not want to waste my breath, but I'm also not trying to say my piece because I'm offended, right? So I want us to really pay attention to this because we're truly digging into the emotional health of you as a parent and your mindset work. The availability you have to compose yourself in a leadership manner so your kid learns from you is a plenty, right? Now, again, there's no judgment on any of these parents, who they are as people, and how they communicate in general. I'm only going off of 2 or 3 sentences per person's suggestion, and that's it, right? So I want us to pay attention to the opportunity that if this is what's underlying, or this is your urge, or this is how you would normally handle it, these are probably some supports that you need to put in place in your own emotion management. I'm just going to call a spade, but I'm not saying that you're a bad person. I'm not saying that you are, emotionally immature as a whole human. None of that, right? But like I said, takes one to know one. I had to do a lot of that work myself, and I didn't really know I needed to do that work until it came right in my face. And I started to impact my relationships with people that I cared about, and I had to really look at myself about that. So again, if you don't want to hear from a straight shooter, this is probably not the show for you. However, if you want to make sure that you are totally listening to a professional who knows how to break out of this pattern and has been there, done that herself, without just using my own kids as examples for how I help people solve this. We've helped people solve this around the world in all kinds of cultures, in all kinds of situations, and with all levels of need and intensity in the household. And if that's part of what you want to solve, and in terms of stopping the meltdown cycle, and also work on you too, we can help you do this. We can help you do this pretty rapidly if you're dedicated to solve this quickly. So if that's something that you're interested in, I encourage you to book a call with our team. Go to meganthompsoncoaching.com/talk, and we'll have a conversation either with myself or one of my team members. And what we'll do is we'll really unpack where you're struggling. What messages are you sending to your kid when you're stuck and overwhelmed? Are you frustrated and yelling? Are you reacting and walking on eggshells? And that plays into the dynamic here, because it's not all about how your child is talking to you or how they're behaving, right? Everybody plays into each other. And in order to turn this around, we have to make sure that we're taking a clear look at that. And we're looking for gaps in the problem here. And then the next thing is that we're really paying attention to what your goals are, right? If your goal is to get your kid to respond to you and be immediately obedient, I'm not your gal. Because in order to make that happen consistently every time, you're going to have to use force. And we don't teach force-based parenting or fear-based parenting, because you can't teach love and fear at the same time. So you either pick one. Now, if you want your child to feel loved, heard, understood, and communicated, you want the whole family to be working in collaborative communication so that one child doesn't end up rising above the other kids because of their high intense needs forever, while also making sure that the rest of the children don't get ignored just by lack of exhaustion from you or time because of how much time you're spending managing these big emotions. Then I encourage you to book a call with me. We'll have a conversation, myself or my team member, and we'll take a clear look at your goals. We'll understand how you can effectively hone in on your child's relationship with you so that you can then be confident you're strengthening your child's relationship with themselves. This helps them stop their own meltdowns, in addition to you obviously stopping the meltdowns that you can see happening both in its tracks as well as ahead of time. And that's different than what most people will tell you. Most people will tell you that they want you to just wait till your kid is calm and talk about it later. And that's crisis of the week coaching. We don't teach that here. Okay, so let's go to meganthompsoncoaching.com/talk. Happy to have a conversation with you. And obviously, as I say all the time, if our work is not the right next step, I will absolutely put you in that direction instead. So free of charge, happy to have that conversation, and look forward to seeing you on the next show. Bye now.